Kabul airport attack shows Afghanistan is still a terror hotbed that the Taliban will struggle to control. In the February 2020 agreement reached with the US in Doha, the Taliban pledged to prevent al-Qaeda and other terror groups from using Afghan soil to launch attacks abroad. Last week, Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid repeated the promise. No death will be caused to anyone outside of Afghanistan. We will not allow anyone to use Afghanistan against them. Edmund Fitton-Brown, who leads the United Nations monitoring team on Afghanistan, noted in 2019 that the Taliban had shown an iron self-discipline in preventing threats to be projected outside Afghanistan by their own members or groups in areas they control. Control is the critical word. Afghanistan is a large mountainous country where communications and travel are difficult, where factions and warlords hold sway. It's an immense task to extend the right of government to far-flung provinces. ISIS and the Taliban, mutual loathing. While the Taliban's connections with al-Qaeda endure, both groups loathe ISIS, and the feeling is mutual. While al-Qaeda sees Afghanistan as its historical hub and has fought alongside the Taliban, ISIS-Khorasan is the more violent interloper. Al-Qaeda probably has several hundred fighters in Afghanistan, according to estimates by counter-terrorism experts, while ISIS-Khorasan may have between 1,500 and 2,000. Ideologically and strategically, they are worlds apart. ISIS doesn't believe in a political agenda, said Clark. ISIS believes that only God can rule. And even though the Taliban is attempting to establish an Islamic emirate, that's not enough for ISIS. ISIS is also viscerally sectarian, attacking minority communities such as the Shia and Sikhs. The Taliban have also been guilty of victimizing Afghanistan's Shia minority, though are now trying to project a more tolerant image. As Clark puts it, in any place they control, ISIS-K are going to implement extremely harsh Sharia law. And they're going to rule with an iron fist. They want to attract and recruit the most ardent sociopaths in the country, and wanton violence helps them bring other fighters into the organization that have a similar mindset. ISIS-K leader Shahab al-Muhajir may hope to attract disenchanted jihadis from other groups if the Taliban is seen to deal with the West. ISIS scoffed at the Taliban victory, saying in its weekly online publication Al-Naba that the victory of Islam will not come via hotels in Qatar nor the embassies in Iran and China. Very soon it came to the cities, especially Jalalabad and Kabul, with its trademark mass casualty bomb attacks. According to UN figures, it launched 77 attacks in the first 4 months of this year. Its current strength may be reinforced by defectors and escapees from detention. Some captured ISIS-K fighters were being held in prisons near Kabul, which the Taliban overran as their offensive accelerated. According to one regional counter-terrorism source, upwards of 100 and perhaps many more ISIS prisoners escaped and have avoided rearrest. Al-Qaeda's force multipliers. ISIS aren't the only ones capitalizing on jailbreaks. As the Taliban emptied out prisons across Afghanistan in recent weeks, they set free hundreds of al-Qaeda operatives, and there is continuing evidence of close ties between the Taliban and al-Qaeda affiliates. The Haqqani network, which straddles both groups, is now highly influential in Kabul. US President Joe Biden has argued that the threat from al-Qaeda has metastasized to places like Africa and Yemen. There's a greater danger from ISIS and al-Qaeda and all these affiliates in other countries by far than there is from Afghanistan, he said last week. But the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, acknowledged in a recent briefing that groups like al-Qaeda could reconstitute in Afghanistan in less than the 2 years previously estimated by the defense officials. Al-Qaeda's leadership and ideological core remains in the mountains along the Afghan-Pakistan border. The U.S. Defense Department said last year that al-Qaeda's affiliate in the region, Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, maintains close ties to the Taliban in Afghanistan, likely for protection and trading. That analysis was supported by the UN monitoring team on Afghanistan, who reported in June that large numbers of al-Qaeda fighters and other foreign extremist elements aligned with the Taliban are located in various parts of Afghanistan, estimating that the terror group has a presence in 15 of the country's 34 provinces. Raffaello Pantucci, a senior associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute in London, says, the idea that the Taliban would simply jettison such supporters after a glorious victory handed to them by God seems to miss a pretty fundamental point about the organization. It is difficult to see these being shredded now that the Haqqanis are so influential in Kabul. Prominent among them is Khalil al-Rahman Haqqani, seen last weekend meeting elders from across Afghanistan. The U.S. Rewards for Justice program has a $5 million reward for his apprehension, saying he has also acted on behalf of al-Qaeda and has been linked to al-Qaeda terrorist operations. Over-the-horizon capability. One question is to what extent U.S. intelligence gathering in Afghanistan will be impaired now that it has no presence on the ground. Biden has downplayed the risk, saying on August 16, "We've developed counter-terrorism over-the-horizon capability that will allow us to keep our eyes firmly fixed on the direct threats to the United States and the region." In the wake of Thursday's airport attack, Biden vowed retaliation. But there's no substitute for eyes and ears on the ground, whatever satellite and surveillance technology offers. U.S. Defense Department spokesman Admiral John Kirby said last week the U.S. did not think the number of al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan was exorbitantly high, but cautioned that our intelligence gathering ability in Afghanistan isn't what it used to be because we aren't there in the same numbers that we used to be. CIA Director William Burns had testified before Congress earlier this year that neither ISIS nor al-Qaeda in Afghanistan have the capability to launch attacks inside the United States, but said when the time comes for the U.S. military to withdraw, the U.S. government's ability to collect and act on threats will diminish. That's simply a fact. Clark concurs and adds that the primary threat from ISIS-K would be to American interests in the region and potentially to Europe. It's not impossible that ISIS-K could strike the U.S. homeland, but I think the odds are quite minimal. Even if the Taliban were prepared to rein in al-Qaeda and other groups, their ability to do so is far from certain. Last month, Ken McCallum, director of the UK's domestic intelligence agency MI5, spoke of the risk of ungoverned spaces emerging in Afghanistan. There are other groups that see Afghanistan as a haven and pose a more regional threat. Parts of the Pakistani Taliban, which have carried out dozens of attacks in their home country, have deep connections with their brethren in Kabul. Abdul Syed, who has studied the Pakistani Taliban in depth, notes that the fall of Kabul resulted in around 800 TTP prisoners being freed, including the group's deputy emir. The TTP renewed their oath of allegiance to the Taliban and exhorted their members to follow in the footsteps of their Afghan counterparts. The ascendance of Afghan Islamists next door will only embolden radicals at home, writes Hussein Haqqani, a former Pakistani ambassador to Washington in foreign affairs. Efforts to force the Taliban's hand might result in violent blowback, with Pakistani Taliban attacking targets inside Pakistan. China is anxious about Uyghur jihadis using eastern Afghanistan as a launching pad for attacks inside the restive Muslim province of Xinjiang. In recent months, according to intelligence sources and former Afghan officials, Uyghurs belonging to the East Turkestan Islamic movement have been in evidence in the province of Badakhshan, which shares a mountainous border with China. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told Taliban co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar last month that Eastern Timor was an international terrorist organization and said the Taliban should completely sever all ties with the group. Pantucci says that China's preeminent concern is that Afghanistan will become a base for such groups. So far, he says, the Taliban have largely provided rhetorical assurances about Uyghurs who might try to use Afghan territory to plot against Beijing. Morale booster. At the very least, the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban has boosted morale among al-Qaeda sympathizers. One message widely distributed on jihadi forums hailed August 15 as a monumental day that had shown what was taken by force can only be recovered by force. The ISIS-K attack has had a similarly electrifying attack on ISIS supporters, with one supporter commenting the head of America was rubbed in the dirt. The UN monitoring team's report in June concluded that it was impossible to assess with confidence that the Taliban will live up to its commitment to suppress any future international threat emanating from al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. The Taliban will do what is required to be politic and try to establish their state, but fundamentally they believe the victory was given to them by Allah, said Pantucci. Why should they turn on their allies who fought with them?
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.